Hi there, I'm Dani Henderson, and he's back, everyone. This is at least our fourth visit, the great research archaeologist, Trevor Grassi. And today he's going to take us on his journey that he just came back from Greece and Rome. And we're going to start with the Acropolis. Trevor Grassi, welcome, sir.
Thank you. So glad to be here again.
Absolutely. Good to have you, mate. Good to have you. Over to you.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is part two of our what we started last time. So this trip I spent most of the trip in Egypt, probably about a month. And then in the last week, I spent a couple days each in Athens in Greece and in Rome. And so I'm gonna do the second part here, just a quick part about Greece kind of, and most of it's gonna get into Rome. But yeah, I have more slides to share as usual. And glad to be back. So I'm gonna switch over to let's see, where is it? Okay.
Screen.
Screen. Sorry, it always takes me a second.
Okay. All right. Take your time. I'll just jazz hands for a couple of seconds here.
Okay. Sorry.
Now you see it.
Yeah.
Now you don't. There we go. Magical.
Okay, you see it?
Indeed.
All right, let's make this big enough to see all these. So this is the name of the of the starting one we did last time. This is the part one right here, just to reference it. So yeah, coming out of here, I just want to give a quick recap where we left off at Egypt. Was we were looking at the Great Pyramid and seeing these big voids and seeing this new tunnel we just looked at. So just to remember what we looked at last time, this was very important because we're beginning to see into the Great Pyramid, into these big spaces up here that likely have a lot hidden. But you had also mentioned some other stuff here, and we saw this tunnel here where we were looking for more entrances into further places, where you said very interesting stuff about what Elena had heard from upstairs regarding a potential technology that's in a passage that's past this tunnel. So that was very exciting. And we were kind of leaving it off talking about how we need to watch the pyramid very closely because of this, and make sure they don't try and sneak in there and take stuff out before we get into these next chambers. So I was just going to bring this up quickly to mention that about like a week after that broadcast saying all that, we got this announcement that the Great Pyramid is going to be closed for renovations starting in June. So this is the exact kind of thing we were just saying to watch out for. And basically, this is where all these chambers are up here. They're saying it's going to be closed in June, which is starting in June, which means it could be for months or for a year, and for internal renovations, which is more than what they generally say. It would just be for conservation basically, but renovation even sounds like they're going to be doing work in there. So just before we jumped into Greece, I wanted to shout this out quick, that in fact exactly what we just said is kind of happening, because this is a really sketchy kind of thing going on. But usually one of the three pyramids are shut down for conservation, and so that if you go, you'll have to come back if you want to go inside all three. But this is oddly timed and kind of suspicious to me. So
yes, as usual, very suspicious. And there is a chair there that has technology that they have probably already found, or they will find. And Commander Ardana from the Galactic Federation of Worlds has called this information out, so nobody can be a greedy bastard and claim it for themselves or hide it. Too late. So thank you for giving us a quick recap here, Trevor. Very much appreciated.
Yeah, I think we got to keep watching out on that. And I don't want to spend too much time just in Egypt, but I do find it very, very interesting what you said about this chair. It reminds me of other chairs I've heard of that have high technology in them. And if we do find this, yeah, it's pretty important that we do say this before it's found, to validate that information. But also, I just want to shout out this other book I just got through, which is really great about getting into this mathematics that I've been talking about, tied to the pyramids, which I think is actually a part of this Hall of Records, going back to Atlantis. Part of it is out there in the open, just ready to be decoded, basically, based on mathematics and geometry of the Great Pyramids themselves. So this is by Ed Nightingale and Laird Scranton, who I've also shouted out before, but he's a good friend who's actually had some medical issues this past couple of weeks, and sending him a lot of health and healing energy to try and make sure he gets a full recovery, because he's really helped with decoding these ancient cosmologies and stuff. And it kind of ties through towards Greece when we start talking about Plato. This and that last book were both books highly recommended by John Anthony West, who I mentioned was a friend of mine for a long time and taught me a lot about this. And Ernest McLean wrote this. This was something John West often referenced when people asked him about Atlantis or Plato's account of Atlantis, because he was always very careful with that word Atlantis. And so he often referenced this, which shows that Plato's account of Atlantis actually had all of this kind of mathematics and this advanced knowledge encrypted into it. So it was more than just a historic account, I believe, but it was a historic account as well. So I kind of actually want to talk quickly about Plato's account, because that's what ties Greece into this whole, the records from Atlantis and the whole kind of Hall of Records story. Plato's account came from Solon, who had told his grandson, who was also named Solon, and then it came to Aristotle and Plato in that way. And he wrote about it in his Timaeus and Critias, these two books within a trilogy he never really finished. But it is written basically as a historic account. And so Solon he was a Greek statesman and a ruler in Athens who eventually stepped down and went to Egypt to find these deeper secrets of history and learn from the Egyptian priests who he encountered in the town of Sais in Egypt. And so this is kind of what ties Greece and Egypt together. He's talking to all of these old priests, and eventually one of the elderly men kind of stands up and says, "You Greeks are like children, pretty much. You don't remember any of this stuff. You kind of remember like one flood, one catastrophe or destruction of the world." But he said, "We Egyptians remember many." And he said that Athena, actually, the founding goddess of Athens, was actually one and the same with Isis, is what he said. And so the Egyptians saw Athens as like a sister city to them. That's what he told them. So he also said that the Athenians had defended against the invading armies of Atlantis many thousands of years earlier. So, a lot of scholars just put this in the category of Plato's trying to give the Greeks more kind of, pride in their history, or trying to embellish their accomplishments of the past. But we have no reason to believe it's not a direct historical account of what happened. And so Solon was eventually taken underground to where the Nile flowed underground through these cave systems. And he got on a boat that was rowed by a man who was blind, who eventually took him up to this island on the Nile underground, which had these two massive pillars that had supposedly come from Atlantis. And these had all the arts and sciences, all the knowledge from Atlantis inscribed onto them. And they were made of this very special metal, which would not be destroyed by fire or by flood. So I wanted to just mention a little bit of that quick, because Plato's account of Atlantis is one of the most trusted ones we have, or one of the most legitimate kind of sources. And he did write it as an historical account. And yeah, I think it's also very interesting to note that if the Nile flows underground in Egypt, that means there could possibly be a way to drain a lot of this water that's blocking our access to a lot of chambers now, or to let the entire water table of Giza come down. So I think that's important, just to tie Greece into Rome and to see that this was something that connected both of these two.
Right.
And with that, I'll take us.
Can I say something before we move on, please?
Of course, yeah.
May I say something? Okay. Now, as far as we know, that story, that record that came from Plato, of course, we have Pythagoras, the great mathematician, scholar, that we owe so much to in terms of mathematics. And then we have Plato, who told us that his account based on Pythagorean mathematics equated to a specific landmark. And you've just given some more context around that. I'd like us also to remember that over time, records have been changed to suit different leaders, rulers, and scholars. It happens to this day. All you have to do is look at the White House. When a new president comes in, they take the last executive orders of the one before and they delete them like little boys. Now, going back to Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. Around this time too, look at Socrates, another great Greek scholar. Socrates would talk about having a spirit guide or an angel. Now that was demonized. Now at the time in ancient Greece, Socrates, his daemon, it was called a daemon, D-A-M-O-N or D-A-E-M-O-N. And when the religions came in over time, Christianity, for example, Romans beating everything out of everybody on so many different levels, and we know that to be true, it turns out that words were changed and daemon became demon. So now Socrates, who's also a man of great scholarly acknowledgement, academia, you know, we're always going to find negatives about these people, but we are told to draw on these three men in particular. We also know in this day and age, as more information on Atlantis in particular is rolled out, that Atlantis was absolutely gigantic. It was monolithic. It was a titan of a land mass. So it, as we know, Trevor, it wasn't just in, you know, in Santorini, as many people think it has been. It wasn't in the Andes, just in the Andes, you know, by Lake Titicaca, which others have said it's there. It was masses and masses of hundreds of thousands of miles across our planet. Okay, and that's what I wanted to say there.
Yeah, I think when we think of Atlantis, we have to understand it as colonies across the whole planet, really. They were sending emissaries out. It was connected, I think, in a global way. Most of the world was kind of had some of this knowledge from Atlantis and from Lemuria even as well, if you go further back in time. But yeah, I think all these guys from Greece too, Pythagoras, they were all going to Egypt to look for this highest or oldest knowledge, trying to go back. So yeah, that's very important. And the dates that Plato gave, everyone takes him seriously until he says this was 8,000 to 9,000 years before they were even talking about it. So this puts it in the general time period where we've been looking at, more this age of Leo going way back. So very interesting, yeah. Here's a couple of these pictures of the Pantheon is the name of the temple that's on top of the Acropolis, which the Acropolis is the hill that it's on, but this is the Pantheon, or Parthenon, sorry. We're gonna go to the Pantheon later in Rome, so it's a little confusing, but this is the Parthenon. So this is one of the theaters there. We had more of these T-shaped grooves in the stones for metal pins to hold them together. There's a really good view of those. Some nicely shaped stones for sure. Here's another view of the Parthenon, which is under construction here. They're doing work on it. It's impressive. Once you spent a month in Egypt, it's a little like, oh, okay.
Oh, but... no. Oh, no. I've been there too, and I loved it. I went there when I was 18 to Glyphada in Athens. Yeah, and that was, I was just blown away. While we're on that, can you tell us the difference for those that don't know between Parthenon and Pantheon, please?
Yeah, well, this is the Parthenon here in Greece and Athens, and the Pantheon is right in the middle of Rome, which I got some shots of towards the end here. The Pantheon, which means like the house of gods, all the gods, pantheism, is the Pantheon. I don't know exactly what Parthenon means, but something similar, I'd imagine. So yeah, this is all made of this white marble, and there was definitely some good stonemasonry skills in Greece. You see these pretty complex pieces they made. But for the most part, I think it was kind of trying to copy these great works of Egypt, and some of it may have been contemporary with it. But yeah, from Plato's account of Atlantis, we hear that both of these civilizations went way back a lot further. And this, you can see the city of Athens underneath. This is kind of the entrance up to the top of the hill there, the Acropolis. And you see down here, I got it closer up, we actually have some of these lions in this Sphinx position. which is a heavy theme we're pulling from the last interview into this one. These sphinxes and lions, I think, all over the planet are symbolizing this higher knowledge being hidden in these places. So it's connected with this same kind of religion. There's a real lion protecting stuff. Cute
So
little cat.
cute. Trevor, can I say something as well, just for people who are new to the journey here with us, that the original mystery schools that we know of, I mean, of course, I'm sure they go back far enough to Phoenician times, because that's a real root beginning of some historical info that we have. But the Greek mystery schools came from the Egyptian mystery schools, right? Because you're just with the Sphinx theme, just to help people that are only just coming to even the idea of a mystery school.
Yeah, well, that's very important. Yeah, because you know, when I was studying all this stuff at first, I was getting into the Egyptian mystery knowledge and teachings, and yeah, then we see it when we leave Egypt, it goes to the Greek mysteries, the Orphic and Eleusinian mysteries. It's placed there. It's worked into the Kabbalah, into the Judaic tradition. The Kabbalah is kind of another rephrasing of this Egyptian knowledge. But yeah, it's these mystery schools that ended up coming into Greece and in Europe. That's what I ended up following kind of in the last couple centuries, where you see the Vatican kind of trying to take a hold over the mystery school teachings. And you see even the Templars and Freemasons, as they came up later, were supposed to be these mystery schools, which at one point had these protections on this knowledge that were for a good reason, to try and protect the wrong people from getting them. But as we've discussed, I think that kind of backfired. And essentially now a lot of the wrong people are the ones who are protecting this information, and the right people don't have it. So yeah, this goes back to the Asclepius, who is who Hermes is speaking to in the famous Lament of Hermes that Graham Hancock has recited often, which talks about this fall down into the lower, the departing of the gods and the loss of this wisdom, and as the world grew totally dark. And then in the end, it describes this knowledge coming back again. So Asclepius is who he's talking to there. That's a very important one. And then this is the Temple of Hephaestus, also here in Athens, which is very cool. This is up kind of on another hill, which gives this great view, where you can see the Acropolis over here with the Parthenon. There's another big restored building. And this is basically the agora, which is one of my favorite words, meaning a place for the discussion of philosophy and high subjects. This is where Plato and Aristotle used to walk around, and through all these pathways, they would discuss philosophy and stuff like that. This building is now a museum that's got a bunch of stuff in it. It's restored. And again, you see these lines across the top of it. So the lines are going to be a big theme here. Also, this half-scaled, this man whose legs turn into snakes. This is another symbol all around the world, much like Quetzalcoatl, or Dagon or Awanis, these early Babylonian, like part scaled beings, part fish or part snake. I want to show that quick. But yeah, I really only got to see Athens while I was there, and just quickly, just for a couple days. And so this is actually the last shot I've got for Greece. We're just going to move on towards Rome, but you can see the ancient and the modern together. The train rolls through here and the restaurants. So this is the old Athenian agora where all these conversations took place. And then we get to Rome. And this is my first view of Vatican City, was coming up on this massive wall, like a fortress, basically. Did you want to say something? You look like you might want to say something.
No, I'm excited to be in Rome. I love Rome.
Okay, yeah. Because Greece really is tied into this. You see this knowledge come out of Egypt into Greece, and out of Greece into Rome, and it's more the timing we're talking about rather than the locations. This is me walking around this massive wall to try and get in. So eventually I came up to this big what's called the Pope's Audience Hall, which you might have seen before. Has this giant window that looks like a serpent's eye.
Wow, that makes me feel bad just looking at it. Wow.
Yeah, I'd seen this building many times before, and then just suddenly it popped right out with this big window right over the wall. And here's another view of it. But yeah, even Michael Salla has shown, many people have discussed the idea that this whole building is kind of shaped like a serpent's head. And eventually I come around and go into the Basilica here of St. Peter. And I ended up getting up into this bottom part of the dome and actually climbing up to the very top. So I've got some pictures of that in a second, but I'll jump ahead to it just to show what this building looks like from up here. Is this, where you can see it's got these two eye windows that, and the whole thing kind of looks like a serpent's head. And then this isn't my picture, but this is what it looks like from the inside. So you can see that again with these scaled kind of ceiling walls, two big eyes, fangs. This is a very, I think there's something to the idea that this is kind of shaped like a serpent's head. Even the statue at the front has.
Who is given credit, Trevor? Who is given credit for designing this?
This is pretty modern. It's only a few decades old, I think, but it's the audience hall for the Pope. So this is where the Pope comes to address his congregations, you know.
Yeah, I know. Like in the past, we go, "Oh, this is Sir Christopher Wren. This is Michelangelo. This is whoever." But I know it is more modern. We can see that. But I wondered if you knew, because often
I forget exactly, but this is late 20th century when this was built, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, even the windows have these kind of weird diamond or slit pupil things. I think there's something to this imagery there. But this is coming around into the front, into St. Peter's Square with this, you know, the Vatican obelisk, which is that red granite we keep talking about from Egypt. And this is the only one in Rome that doesn't have any hieroglyphs on it of all the Egyptian obelisks. But looking up a little closer here, we see the lions again in the Sphinx position. Each of these heads have two bodies on the lions. And this square down here, it's actually quite a bit darker than the red granite. And you can kind of see here again. This is, I think, this black cube symbolism, basically a black cube wrapped around this obelisk, which has ties, which is associated with the planet Saturn. And, you know, we've heard a bit about this black cube symbolism that stretches out, but we see it in all religions. We see it in Islam and Judaism and Christianity. And yeah, we know that it's got something to do with, I guess, the planet Saturn. Some people have associated this directly with like Satan, or going back to the Egyptian Set. I think it has something to do with this idea of the principle of accumulation and mass and physical matter and that type of thing, but it's also been basically associated with evil at times. But I think that's a symbol that has a lot of importance. We're starting to put together here, but it definitely looks like the black cube symbolism around it here. And this was taken in 37 AD from Alexandria, this obelisk, and brought here to Rome. It was placed here actually in the 1500s, but it was somewhere over on the side here before. This is one of the oldest things taken from Egypt. And then going into the St. Peter's Basilica, just to show how extravagant it is. This is looking down from the dome, and this is in the dome looking up into the top of it. It's very fancy. And then so when you climb up to the top,
it's just an astounding, stunning work of art, of many art shapes, sacred geometry, acoustics. It's just so beautiful to look at. I mean,
yeah, it's enormous too. When you're up in the dome looking down, it's scary. If you fell, you'd die. It's that high. And yeah, Michelangelo was one of the lead designers of this basilica. So when you get up to the top of the dome, this is what you're seeing, a famous image we've seen before, probably looking down the causeway here. This is basically this kind of Atlantean geomancy, it's called, or ley line magic, earth magic, harnessing these currents of energy that flow through the planet. And yeah, this goes back. I even stuck in, actually, here's a picture I had from Teotihuacan from years ago, where I'm standing on the Pyramid of the Moon, and you see this similar type of technique being used here. which John Michel actually gets into in his book. This one had a good cover image, but it's actually, there's a newer version called The New View over Atlantis. And this is one of the first books that goes deep on that type of technology or magic, whatever you want to call it.
Trevor,
Yeah.
can I share something, or can we share something again? As so many people are hungry for evidence and information. If you go back to that image of, go back, yeah, there, right there. I mean, one of the things I always think of when I see the center there is the star forts across the planet, which is a whole other subject, but people think about star forts or star image on the ground and who made those. But here, there is a knowing that that Rome and London. So Rome was the religious center, London was the financial center, and Washington, D.C. was the military center, I believe. I could have got that wrong, but
yeah,
and
exactly.
they are all built on the same geometry. So you can look at the blueprint across Washington, D.C., Rome, or the Vatican, etc., London. There's elements of Paris too. And they're on this geometric structure that is mapped out and blueprinted across our planet. It's just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I hope I can go much deeper into that in the future. I just kind of have to touch on it here, but that is the idea. You have the obelisks in all three of those places. They're all sovereign territories that aren't technically part of the country they're in. It's very interesting. Those three are these power centers of the world. And this is where the Vatican kind of flexes that, really, where they show their power over and influence over the world. And this is when you look over to the left here, you see this is all the Vatican Museum, and down here at the end is that dome with the pine cone in it, which we talked about before. But we're going to go deeper into that in a second. And a lot of what comes now is what's in the Vatican Museum over here, which is just full of all this symbolism we've been looking at. And to start with that, let's just notice the hats, of course, where these hats are very clearly mimicking these elongated skulls, I think, as one factor, just like the hats of Egypt and where we saw in all these other cultures. It's to pay homage to the Anunnaki, to the elder gods, to the older gods, as they were called. So not only that, but it's also much like the fish shape that's worn by Dagon or Oannes, this Babylonian god, is almost the same as the mitre cap, and it's almost certainly what it's reflecting here, which we see him a couple times in these older reliefs and images. So the tall hat, that's just one symbol that's coming from earlier times. And there's another image of Ascension of Christ in inside the basilica. A couple other shots. This is the dome from the floor, what it looks like. And then right below that dome is this big black shrine, which is supposed to mark the actual final resting place of St. Peter. But if you look down here, there's these things on the base that I want to look closer at, have a lot of the symbolism right in here, which is everywhere. You know, the crossed keys with this hat is everywhere across Rome, not just in the Vatican, but everywhere. So yeah, I think this is representing these elongated skulls, the Anunnaki, and the cross keys, I think, have many layers of symbolism as well. But both of them could also be speaking to the third eye, to the pineal gland, and to these two currents or channels that go down your spine and back up. And there's all these bees everywhere, which are commonly associated with this the Barberino or Barberini family, who had them on their family crests, and supposedly they put all these bees all around the Vatican, which there's many of. There's another one right in the basilica with the bees, and another bee just outside on its own. But as we've talked about, I think this kind of ties into Jesus' actual metaphor for the third eye being the land of milk and honey, and the honey being this fluid substance we're trying to create within our own bodies to feed the third eye what it wants. I think the bees have many more associations that make them interesting to have them all over the Vatican. And I don't know if that's all just because of this one family. You know, they have they're like little alchemists making gold when they make honey. They have kind of hive mind. They protect their queen. They also have this kind of levitation aspect where they're using sound, sonic resonance to help levitate themselves as they fly, I think. So there's a lot of very important qualities of the bees, which makes it interesting. And they're often associated with royalty as well. But I want to talk a little more about these cross keys. And this is them on the floor. This is them on a building. And just to show it's all over. There's another one where there's a pine tree rather than a pine cone. But I think, again, this is showing the third eye. The pineal gland is what it's talking about. And this was in the museum, very old piece with the cross keys. And then this one, I'm almost sure this was in one of the Da Vinci Code movies, but yeah, this is one of the only places where you actually see the keys uncrossed, which is interesting. And you see him holding one of these here, and he's pointing actually down to the ground and towards the base of the obelisk, really, right here. And I think what he's pointing to is the underground, where we know is the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum, or the secret archives that are underneath the Vatican. And the symbol of that archive, the logo, are these crossed keys. So I think that's the primary kind of principal meaning behind these crossed keys, is who has access to these archives that are below. And recently they've removed the word secret from the title. So now it's just called the Apostolic Archives, but you can see it still uses the same exact symbol for its logo. And this is not mine, but this is one of the few photos that have come out supposedly of the library under there. This is one of the entrance halls to it, which is quite extravagant, and also with this kind of Masonic checkerboard floor. And this is another famous picture that's gotten out. Now, personally, I think these are just the entrance halls to the real Hall of Records or archives that are under there. I think it's much bigger. I think there's a whole kind of hidden city below there. And this is just what we've been able to see. But this was interesting because I had this exact photograph put into this slideshow a couple of weeks ago when we last talked. But we didn't get to this part, obviously. But in between that time, Michael Salla actually had another talk with JP. And he used this same photograph as his background here.
Oh, fascinating.
I found it quite interesting.
Yeah.
They were talking about going into below a military base, where JP said he was looking at these different books that were describing the technology of these arcs that he's been visiting.
In the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, and elsewhere on his different missions. But the Grand Canyon one was the most exciting. I'm actually gonna bring that up a little bit later too, because I found more to do with that.
Good.
But this is supposed to be underneath a US military base, which doesn't necessarily mean in the continental US, but that's kind of what it sounded like. But I definitely found it interesting that Dr. Michael Salla, he chose to use this image maybe to get us thinking about the Vatican archives, because as we get into this age of disclosure, I think a lot of the actual knowledge of the ancient world ended up down here.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Without question, half the information is in the Vatican. Without question, many have lost their lives to bring this information forward. Many books are taken out of the Holy Bible that people read. Of course, yes, absolutely. Agree with you.
Yeah, like we've discussed that, you know, there are protections so that certain people can't get access to this stuff, but at the same time, you know, whatever they could get their hands on ended up here. You know, there's more down here than there is in the Smithsonian basement, I would guess.
They've had more billionaires down in the underground, the billionaires that are able to have some kind of intelligence and think and use their brains, and they have a desire to see the ancient artifacts of this beautiful planet. So yeah, probably more billionaires have visited the Vatican to see these wonderful treasures than anybody else could put a billionaire anywhere else in the world, because they're such a small little group anyway. Moving along.
Only really these royal families are allowed in here, and it's like, why? We know there's how much is in there. They say if you know the name of a book, you can look at it, but we don't know the name. We don't know the name of the authors of the books even who wrote half this. And
it's just so wicked. Wicked, wicked, wicked people.
Yeah. If you ask me, I don't have enough time today to present as much evidence as what makes me feel this way, but I feel quite certain that at least most, if not all, of the Library of Alexandria was actually taken and put under the Vatican. Not burned, it was stolen, and then what was left over was burned. So that's
Yeah.
what I actually believe. And it's hard to show enough information to bring that forward all at once, but that's what I think I'll get into more in my documentary stuff I'm working on now.
Yeah, is it Hypatia or Harpatia or Hypatia, the beautiful, very, very, very scholarly, wonderful woman who was the final librarian of the Library of Alexandria, who they say,
Yeah,
yes,
Hypatia, yeah.
Hypatia, who they say, because at that time, of course, the Greeks were still running. Last 300 years of Egyptian history was run by the Greek pharaohs, the Ptolemy family, the Ptolemies, as you know, and yeah, that beautiful lady librarian. They say she was dragged on the street and they skinned her. They took her skin off using shells. What men? And it is also said on many, many different areas and levels of this planet that there were beautiful non-papyrus scrolls and documents that were alien of ultra technology. And of course they weren't burnt. It's like the Nazis doing a run around the world and burning all the books to dumb the people down, which is still happening. But the books are a lot more subtle now. They rewrite them, they take chunks of information out that would educate the planet. But obviously that's all being exposed, so that's stopping. But anyway, please continue with your lovely symbology. This is really good, Trevor.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of where they got started from. It was 332 BC when Alexander came in and he started this city of Alexandria and the library there. And then it was more like the 3rd into the 4th century AD when finally all of that was taken. And this was the same time when the Council of Nicaea is happening, and these controlling priests were trying to take this whole religion of Jesus and turn it into something they could use as a control structure of the state. So they chose all these books, cut out all the ones they didn't like, and thankfully we had groups in Alexandria that were willing to go and hide these Gnostic Gospels we've since found. And I do think we'll be finding many more of those probably in the near future. Anyway, this slide is just to show one of the central kind of bloodlines or royal lineages in Europe. Also has the cross keys right on their crest, which is the House of Est, which is an important family. But I do think they took it straight from Alexandria. And I just stuck in a couple pictures. This was from 2019 on my first trip to Egypt, where I went to Alexandria. This is where the lighthouse used to stand, in the Citadel of Kite Bay, this is called. So I wanted to show this quick. This is what the modern Library of Alexandria looks like today, where people are still studying all this knowledge. And it's supposed to be right on the site of the ancient library as well. So that's pretty cool. And here's just a couple more to show that there's sphinxes all over Alexandria, of course, because this is another place where below the sphinxes is usually hidden knowledge, or cats in general. Anyway, here we come into, this is the Egyptian section of the Vatican Museum. So we have Thoth here in relief. Here's, this one's kind of hard to see, but this was a beautiful elongated skull statue that you could see very well. We had these Assyrian or Babylonian reliefs, again with this pine cone imagery, which is relating to the pineal gland and to excuse me, this type of harmonic vibration, some type of technology. Like I was saying, I think these handbags they're called, might be more like batteries or power sources, possibly. And there was a couple of these with the Anunnaki gods basically being shown here, with the tree of life, the DNA double helix, the path of the spine.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
can I say something? So with the Anunnaki, or the depiction of, you know, with their tall kind of headdresses, headwear, and then if you look, there's a very great similarity to the Egyptians' crown of Upper Egypt, also. And then they had these beards. Well, anyway, I don't want to go too far on the beards and the technology there, but there's a thinking that I feel like there was a plug-in to these flowers, like an electrical source. So let's say they grew their hair long, could plug their hair, the hair is antenna. Look at our indigenous American brothers and sisters who had their hair chopped off by the militaries that stole them. And because the hair is an antenna, and the ancients knew that. And I have a theory myself that that they would plug their locks into these flowers, these portals, these electrical conductors. That was just sharing a thought there.
Yeah, interesting. Well, that also ties to the Vril Society, where all these women grew their hair very long, or the story of Samson in the Bible. It's an idea I've heard many times, actually, that it does serve as a kind of antenna when you grow it longer. So then I knew there was all these statues of Sekhmet here at the Vatican, tons of them. I mean, at least 20 like life-size statues of her, as well as smaller ones too. But I didn't know where they were, and this is really interesting. Sekhmet is again tied in with this idea of the cat, the female cat, being a very fierce protector of her cubs and defender against people who aren't her cubs. So this is what's kind of relating to the people who deserve this sacred knowledge and the people who don't. She's the filter that you have to be cool with Sekhmet to get to this secret knowledge that she protects. And usually, you know, her main shrine actually is in Karnak, where Elena was just talking to you about her time at Karnak, where I don't think she mentioned it in that interview, but that was a great interview she just gave about that very important stuff there. But these statues that were taken to the Vatican, they were actually placed in a very interesting way alongside this baboon, Jehuti baboon. And here you can see more of the Sekhmets. They were all lined up in this. You can see this is like a curved hallway they were in on both sides of it. And it's all painted red. This is very interesting because it's actually right behind the pine cone. All those Sekhmets are lined up behind this, inside this room right here. So I was mentioning in our interview the secret history of the third eye, the second interview we did, that the symbolism here is of the inside of a skull, this white dome, where centered in it is the third eye, the pineal gland. And that kind of goes hand in hand with on the inside, this being like the inside of a brain almost with the red. And showing all these Sekhmet is basically saying that Sekhmet is in favor or guarding the Vatican's right to have this authority over the third eye, essentially. And there's two more Egyptian sphinxes down here, lions in this position. So this is very interesting. Notice again the difference between an open and closed pine cone, which is much more round when it's open and pointier when closed. What we're looking at is a closed pine cone, a closed third eye. And these two peacocks next to it are also closed. They don't have their tails open, which is often a symbol of the crown chakra, like in this old Heinrich Kuhnrath alchemical manuscript here. You see the crown chakra is shown as the peacock plumage, right? In this picture as well, you see the peacock down here is all open and kind of connected up through the planets and zodiac signs. Here you have the same philosopher's stone metaphor we talked about with the sun and moon and male and female principles. And the tree of life is kind of also showing the same thing, the arbor vitae, which when I was looking for this picture, I just happened to notice again that when you type in arbor vitae in an image search, it brought up all these pictures of the brain, because the arbor vitae is actually this section right here. which I should have mentioned in our third eye interview, but had to stick this in quick. That's the tree of life. And I didn't have that in before, so. Anyway, the peacock, it's also in Hinduism, and this is Kumar, Lord Kartikeya, or Kumar Kartikeya, whose transdimensional vehicle is a peacock. This is interesting. And then the Yazida people from around Armenia and Turkey, this is a very ancient religion as well. And they use the peacock, they call it the peacock angel, also known as Tazi Melek, or different names. We see also on this seal, this language of triangles and lines, which is exactly what JP was discussing, having seen in the Grand Canyon Hall of Records. This language on all these tablets was written in triangles and lines. So you can see all of this is blurry, but that's actually what's down there over here. And these three buildings actually kind of look like the three great pyramids in a sense. But this is another, right here is another Yazida seal, which shows this central, staff, I guess, with a kind of pineal shaped top, two peacocks beside it, and two lions at the bottom, with what's pretty clearly the great three pyramids here. And jumping from that straight back to the Vatican, look at that. There's the pine cone, there's the two peacocks and the two lions. And even these three pedestals down here too. So, wow, you have a lot around this pine cone. You have this imagery of the skull, of the brain inside. You have these sekhmets protecting it from the inside. And that baboon, the Thoth Jehuti baboon, there's actually two of them right beside this central door here. So we've talked a lot about already that Jehuti is another one of these symbols of the open third eye. And so all of this comes together. You've got more of these lions that are straight from Egypt. They actually have Egyptian hieroglyphs written all around their bases here. And it's quite a compound symbol. We know the staff with the pine cone has also been used by the Pope. And that goes back to Bacchus and Dionysus, some of these older things. And again, Owanis or Dagon, the fish guy, where the bishop's mitre hat comes from. You see again this kind of staff with this pineal type or round type top. And this is what's right in front of it, is a sculpture by Arnaldo Pomodoro. And it has this, it's another bronze sculpture, just like the pine cone itself. But this has this symbolism of, I think it's kind of referencing the exploded planet, Maldek maybe. I've heard it called several things, but the planet that exploded to make the asteroid belt. I feel like this is kind of a symbolic reference to that. But the artist who made this actually made pieces like it that are all across the world. This is a list, including at the UN headquarters in New York and some very prominent places. This same type of exploding sphere is shown. And this is what the artist himself said about it. I thought was important. That's what drives me to make the spheres, breaking these perfect magic forms in order to reveal internal ferment, mysterious and alive, monstrous yet pure. I create a discordant tension, a conflict, with the polished sign, a unity composed of incompleteness. So we see the artist himself basically saying, we're trying to create this discordant tension and a state of incompleteness, which goes along with the closed third eye and pineal gland to me. It's speaking of trying to keep this function turned off within humanity, I think. And so here's just a few more to show this lion theme is everywhere. There's lions everywhere, beautiful sphinxes in this Egyptian section, other kind of sphinxes, other kind of lions. These are the shishi cats, or the stone lions from the Far East, sometimes they're called foo dogs, but
Foo dogs that will have the paw on the world. And they say the one there we can see with the paw on the world. Some say that the foo dogs will have the paw on the circle of life or the flower of life, the gematria. And then the other foo dogs, you get them in pairs generally. That one there is more feminine. That one with the world under his foot is more masculine. Yeah, they're beautiful. I do love me a foo dog.
yeah. You see, this is a set of both of them, which you usually do see them together, and they have the sphere under the different paws. This one under the left paw, this one under the right. And yeah, a lot of times it has a flower of life pattern right on it. I think it's the same exact thing that these cats are used. That what I say is a universal symbolism. It goes into Asia, even in South America, you have the puma. In Mexico, you have the jaguar. There's always this kind of association of these cats being protectors of the archives and the secret knowledge. And moving through here, this one, I couldn't help notice these couple little blue discs kind of in the sky over here that kind of look like something, like some flying saucers almost. But yeah, that's just
no, don't go. No. Who's the artist? And look, we have a stargate, which is a rainbow, which is people are coming to understand now. The rainbow is actually a full circle. It's not just an arch of light. It goes in and back round again. It is a loop, a stargate. So again, the ancients nod to, and there's an antenna at the top of that mound there. So who was the artist for this piece?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure who painted this. There was just halls and halls of these paintings, and I was kind of just running through them, trying to get to the Sistine Chapel, as everyone does, where you can't take pictures there. But I caught a few pictures. I just clipped this because I thought that was pretty interesting. But
love it. Domes at the back.
Some big historical event here being shown. I'm not sure at all what it is, but I've seen things in the sky in some of these paintings oftentimes. This is an important symbol right here that I wanted to show quickly, which has a few different forms. This is another version of it. And this is even another version of it. It's called the Auspis Maria. And so this is a symbol associated with Mother Mary, kind of, and it's just this A and M interlocking in various ways. And this symbol actually was also protected with these lions. I found interesting. But here's a few different versions of what it looks like. And I just can't go too deep on this as much as I'd like to today, but I think it's something I'll discuss later. That I think this ties way back and references earlier symbols. But I think it also ties into the Masonic square and compass if you put it between the twin pillars of Solomon's temple, which is what the Masons are always referencing back to. Though if we look at Solon's story of Atlantis, we see that these twin pillars actually go back to Atlantis, where he found the two pillars underneath Egypt. But I can't go all the way deep on that just yet. But I do think it ties into this shape, which has been called the Fingerprint of God by Marco Rodin, who's someone who's been studying this kind of free energy in the shape of the torus. And it's essentially a symbol that is supposed to be a key to accessing this free energy or 0 point type energy. And may have something to do with Tesla's cryptic 369. The quote that he said, these are 3, 6, and 9 have these very important qualities and they're secret to the universe. So I think it's somewhat tied to this. And without going too deep, I do think this is also tied to the Enneagram, which I mentioned quickly in the first part of this interview, which is numbered even the same way, clockwise from 1 to 9. Just like this other symbol. They're very close. It's just they're kind of shown slightly different. These two middle ones don't cross each other. They just come down. But it's a little too much to get into for the moment. But I do think this symbol goes all the way back to Atlantis, really. And that it might be speaking of this same type of energy, which has been called Vril. Vril power. as many have described it, what the Nazis were even looking for. I'll get more into that another time. I will shout out Gurdjieff again, was the guy who found this symbol, and he found it supposedly on this ancient Egyptian map, which ended up leading him to the Gobi Desert and to these other ancient brotherhoods, supposedly. But this book is where he describes finding the enneagram, and it's partly autobiographical and partly metaphorical, I think, but very interesting book there. I'm just gonna have to get into that some other day, I think. But as I went through, there was a lot of these. This is the Raphael's, the School of Athens here, showing Plato and Aristotle and stuff walking around. So this is I don't know, it kind of just shows the church saying, you know, we're tolerant or accepting of philosophy and free thinking. And, you know, it's kind of giving this implication of something where, you know, the church really hasn't been so open to the free thinking, but they're showing this like they are.
Rodin, Auguste Rodin, I love him.
Yeah, they even have this right there showing the thinking man. There was supposedly, I think, 27 to 30 molds made from the original cast by Rodin. And this is the one at the Vatican, is jet black. Very interesting. They're also kind of showing Van Gogh, who has his interpretation of La Pieta, this painting. Then there was actually 3 Salvador Dalis. This is one of them. So it's kind of showing this power over a lot of, I don't know, some of the greatest artists of history. And, you know, there's Raphael's and Michelangelo's everywhere. But also they had these globes, like astronomical globes. And you see this, even in early times, this interest in astronomy and the zodiac signs. These are pretty cool globes. But we know the Vatican's always been quite obsessed with the stars, even though they shut up so many great astronomers in the past and astrologers, or burn them at the stake or whatnot.
Yeah, enter Copernicus and Galileo.
Yeah, and like, yeah, it would seem, you know, while they're burning men like that at the stake, often they're actually taking all this knowledge of the stars and holding on to it, and also of the Earth and of cartography. These are some early world maps that were huge, actually. These display stands were like as tall as me, basically. Okay, so then we leave the Vatican and just kind of go to look at a little bit else throughout Rome. And this is the Pantheon right here. So all these pillars out in front, this is the very same rose granite from Egypt that we've been looking at. And these pillars, actually the top is, I think, this Greek white marble, but the pillars themselves are the same granite. And out in front of the Pantheon is another obelisk. This one's got hieroglyphs on it, but the same red granite. It's also got this cube around the base, the crossed keys, the hat, this single star, these interesting fish characters. And inside the Pantheon, this is what it looks like. Very beautiful. The ceiling is, of course, awesome dome here with 28 squares around it, just like the days in a lunar cycle. And this was very interesting. As I was leaving, this is kind of off to the left side of the main entrance. And I could see, not through the camera, but from my eyes from here, I went closer up. And above this door, you have a Masonic compass, kind of turned into a pentagram with this X underneath it. This looks a lot like, basically, the implication of a Masonic pentagram. And it says artistic insignia of the congregation of virtuosi of the Pantheon. So this is a Masonic seal basically stuck right onto the Pantheon, and probably some private area in this door, or lodge room even, which is pretty interesting because, yeah, we've been getting into Masonry. In Italy, you have what's called the P2 Masonic Lodge, which is very notoriously corrupt, even for Masonry. And like around a decade ago, their long-serving Grand Master got arrested with very serious charges. And I think this group has kind of waned in power since that time, but it's one of the groups that's vying for power in Rome, of which there are many. And yeah, I saw a lot of these insignias and sigils and seals on different buildings. There's a few that look like this, which you can notice is a different one with this red hat at the top.
Scales of justice.
Yeah, it kind of looks like scales or something. But this red hat at the top is interesting. This is it's called a Saturn hat because it mimics the rays of Saturn. But yeah, exactly. To me, it looks exactly like a flying saucer.
You know what else? You know what else? Sorry. You know what else is interesting? Like the pyramids that you see there. In Hawaii, some of the beautiful indigenous people or people that live in Hawaii, you will see that kind of a tattoo similar to the red pyramid there. They have the upside down or painting the other way, almost like pyramid tattoos on their arms or wherever they put them, which denotes their ancestral lineage. Or let's say they live in the Wailua or the Waimea homelands. They will often depict that as a way to connect to. So it's interesting because that's what Mark brought to my mind immediately.
Yeah, well, I think it being called, it's actually called a Saturn hat. That says a lot. And the fact that it's very much looks like a flying saucer as well is very interesting. This association with Saturn and its rings, I think this is what Tolkien was even referencing with Sauron, which is like Satan or Saturn, essentially, but being called the Lord of the Rings, I think he's talking about Saturn. The rings of Saturn are the Lord of the Rings in this metaphor he used. So I think that goes very deep. Tolkien, he had a very, very deep knowledge of this symbolism. So I'm almost sure that's what he was implying there. Here's the last Pope, Pope Ratzinger, or Pope Benedict, who retired or resigned over a decade ago now, and he's wearing this Saturn hat here. He resigned because he had to, because he was very, very nasty person, to be honest. But then you come to Pope Francis, which this kind of gives us the array of all the symbols here. So he had the red hat back as a bishop of Buenos Aires, and these are his own symbols. The IHS is for in hoc signo, that's the sigil of the Jesuit order. And he's the first Jesuit pope. And the Jesuit order is, I think, more like a secret society than really a religious sect or anything. It's not quite a secret society. It's more like Freemasonry, which is a society with secrets where they allow the world to know they exist, but they don't tell anyone what they know. But it's kind of a,
this could just be a rumor, but the Jesuits are said to be higher than the Pope and the whole of the Vatican, the Rome as a group, and they say that the person who's apparently called a doctor in some regards, whose name sounds like Wauchi, is a Jesuit from an extremely high order. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think the Jesuits have a long history of being involved in this, in a lot of missionary, endeavors where they may have taken a lot of knowledge even from the indigenous of America, and they've been going on these missionary projects for a long time. I don't know if they were always the same as they are today, just like Masons or other groups, but I think today they're very, very corrupt order, and they have a lot of the information. I think they control a lot of the finance, and a lot of people who talk about the Black Pope. This is a basically a Jesuit kind of character, head of the church, where some people say basically controls the white Pope. But it's sure that the Jesuit order is a group that has a lot of power within the Vatican itself. And they actually run the Vatican space program, basically, where the Vatican has two actually of the world's most powerful telescopes in the world. which are run by this Jesuit, forget his name, but yeah, one of them is actually called Lucifer. That's real. You can look that up. They call it Lucifer. One of them is in the continental United States, one of them is in Italy, but it's sure that the Jesuit order is very powerful and has a lot to do with this. And between that and the Holy Roman See, these are all kind of secret orders to me. The P2 Masonic Lodge, the Jesuits, the Vatican itself, and others who are all, basically trying to have this power over the library and over the knowledge.
And over the world.
Yeah. So you see Pope Francis actually getting the keys and the tall hat once he becomes Pope. But this says a lot. The single star might mean Sirius, I would guess. I don't know. And this bunch of grapes actually, I think, might even be possibly a symbol of knowledge of inner earth or underground spaces. Because of some of these earlier stories I don't have time to get into, but that may be something right there. And so this one requires a second to explain, but we're kind of getting to the end already, so we're doing pretty good actually. This is called the prophecy of the popes, or the prophecy of Saint Malachy. And Saint Malachy was an Irish bishop who traveled to Rome in the 12th century, and he ended up seeing all this horrible conditions all across Rome as he traveled across Europe, I mean. And when he got to Rome, he saw this extravagance and opulence. So he was kind of in a strange mood when he got there, but he was a little upset by all what he saw at the Vatican. And he ended up having this vision where he wrote down this prophecy, and he wrote 112 different Latin phrases that each were to describe the coming popes before the end times. So what he says at the end, glory of the olive, was the clue that referenced Pope Benedict, the last pope. And essentially this prophecy, which is housed at the Vatican and supposedly endorsed by them in a certain sense, it basically says that Pope Francis, who we have right now, is the last pope. And it says, this basically says, in the last persecution of the Holy Roman Church, Peter the Roman will be seen feeding the multitudes during their tribulations, which is interesting because Pope Francis was actually seen handing out bread and food in Buenos Aires and things like this. So each of these phrases relate to the Pope that was supposed to be there, and they've all fit to some degree, whether it's a self-fulfilled prophecy or not. But basically it says he's the last one. He'll be seen feeding the masses, and then basically it says, and then the church, the city on 7 hills will be destroyed.
I would like to see whoever's in there right now feed the masses in terms of giving up the wealth that belongs to all of us that's stuffed in the Vatican, returning that to us, the people across the world. That's what I would like to see, just as an aside.
Yeah, I think, that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about just trying to describe him as a person, but ultimately saying that hopefully this won't mean the destruction of everything, especially what's underground, but the end of the system. And basically, yeah, this is 800-year-old prophecy that basically says our current pope is the last pope. And then the city on 7 hills, which we know is the Pleiades. Rome is one of the cities built on 7 hills, but it's obviously referencing Rome here. It basically says it's going to be destroyed, and then the dreadful judge will judge his people. The end is what it says. So that's very interesting, because as we get into this age of disclosure, it would seem like that's almost exactly right. Like this could be the last pope. This could be the end of the system. This could be the time when we actually get disclosure of what's under there. So
oh, it is, Trevor. It definitely is. There's no two ways about it. And it's so exciting. Yeah. Like, think of the things that the whole world is going to have the knowledge of, and see the beautiful things that we've been hidden from, and it's just going to be so fantastic. And there's more and more coming up. There's so many deals being done. Oh, if we give this to the people, will they? No, mate, you've had your chance, move along. We're doing your job for you. So's everybody else. Like, it's so exciting. And then there's the fact that we're going to start looking at Roman numerology in different ways, or Roman numerals. We're going to look at the fact that M's were put in front to make timelines look longer than they are. We're going to realize that the whole of the history of the planet has been muffled, muffed up, stuffed up, hidden. People, so many deaths in the name of truth, that will be honored. Their names will be heard, their names will be loved on, their names will be read. It's not okay that anything bad has happened to anyone, but and in terms of judgment, we are the judges. We are the judges, and everyone that's done anything terrible, dreadful, they will have the opportunity to judge for themselves. The error of their ways for getting lost in whatever they got lost in. So brilliant. Continue, please.
Yeah, it is very exciting. I mean, I've gone deep into the thought experiment of considering the type of technology we might be getting soon, the type of information. It's a beautiful world that I see right here on the horizon. And so this prophecy really does make sense to me. It's it does feel like it's that close. This was given to supposedly give these Catholics or Christians some type of idea of how long it would be, essentially, until the next coming of Christ, or the rapture, or whatever they want to call it, day of judgment, essentially. So very interesting, especially since Pope Francis, this has actually happened since we last spoke too. Not this picture, it was from earlier, but just in the last couple of weeks, CNN even reports Pope Francis has signed his resignation letter already to be used in the event of him becoming impaired due to these health issues he's having.
Wow. Let's take a moment to acknowledge the Swiss Guard in his yellow and purple, which is a royal signature garb there. They always look so amusing. Of course, that's ancient costume that the Swiss Guard wear, and they're the only guards in the world that guard the Vatican. And they are supposed to be some of the most highly trained personnel on the planet. Like, do not mess with a Swiss Guard, because when it comes to kicking butts, apparently they are some of the very, very best. But I also heard that this order of Swiss Guard are also being withdrawn. Have you heard anything like that?
I've heard a lot of kind of rumors about what's been happening at the Vatican, but I don't know anything I know for sure, really. But it sounds like things are breaking apart there. It sounds like this whole power structure is kind of crumbling. Like I said, it's been over a decade since Pope Ratzinger resigned, basically in disgrace. I think he was involved in some very nasty stuff. And we've had a decade to consider that. The fact that popes don't really resign, that's not something that happens. And here we're getting a second, essentially already signed letter of resignation from Pope Francis. We have to be thinking about what this all means, because it really does look like the power is shifting there. And I'm really hoping that means we're getting closer to access to the archives that are kept there.
Yes, we are. Let's put hope in the past where it belongs. Let's own the present moment now, Trevor Grassi, my friend. I'm a research archaeologist that spends so many hours going around the world, bringing great photographs and great presentations to us. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, happy to do it. Well, it reminds me so much of what's in Egypt with all these closed doors around the Sphinx. It's like, hey, if that doesn't go anywhere, why can't we see that? Why can't we just walk in? It's like, if you've got this knowledge of all these books, and believe me, I don't think, I need to make clear that I don't think any of these records are just books. I think it's also, like we've been saying, technology, working technology.
Yeah.
I have heard rumors, at least, that there was a similar type of chair, as we described, underneath the Vatican, which supposedly could look into the future or potential future timelines, things like that, had quantum kind of properties in this technology. So, and not to mention that, but also like gold and silver and valuables.
Yeah, that belongs to all of us. How many more slides do we have, Trevor?
Just like 10 here. I'm just wrapping it up. Actually, this is kind of the end. There's a selfie with Bar Trevi I had to get. This is by the Trevi Fountain.
Trevi Fountain. Oh,
it's quite famous anyway.
Lovely.
And I went to the Colosseum, but we've all seen that. So this was a third Egyptian obelisk I stumbled into just walking around through Rome, which again had all the hieroglyphs on it. And so, yeah, just as a little outro here from this one, I wanted to show a couple of things from Egypt. This is actually the quarry at Aswan, where all this red granite comes from. So I didn't go here on my last trip, but I went on my first trip. I went to the Aswan quarry. And this is the only place even within Egypt you get that stone. Here across the quarry, you can see the giant unfinished obelisk, which you can see a little closer up here. This is the biggest obelisk ever commissioned or attempted. It's upward of 1,200 tons, it's been estimated. It's really amazing because this was commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut, and it cracked while they were cutting it out, which probably really sucked for her on that day. But for us, it's actually an incredible gift because we actually got to have this left behind in mid-process, and we can see these scoop marks involved in the process of excavating it out, which to me goes very much against the way in which they say this stuff was shaped, which was just taking balls of this stone and pounding on the bedrock to break it away, which means the granite balls would break just as quickly as the ground itself, and doesn't make any sense at all when you see these patterns of being scooped out. So yeah, just to show where all of this came from, here's another shot of the obelisk. It's enormous, and yeah, you wouldn't have this kind of pattern left behind if that's how it was made. I think it has something probably more to do with, like I've heard in South America or different places where they did this type of stonework too, they not that this is the complete technology, but part of it maybe, or sometimes it was used, they had a certain mixture of like plants that could be turned into a paste and applied to a stone, and that might actually soften the stone for an inch or two in, and then you could scrape off these outer layers. And I think this pattern is kind of more implying something more like that going on. If not, but you know, they'd need more technology to lift this thing up and move it because it's enormous.
Is this the one that's at Karnak? Because there's two at Karnak, one standing and one laying down. Is this the one that's laying down at Karnak?
This is at the Aswan quarry, which is it's not at Thebes, which is where Karnak is, but it's very close to there. It's in Upper Egypt, which is the south. Because the upper is meaning the elevation, not the north or south. So it is in that general region. And there's one more view of it. But also in that general region, which is still underneath this red granite bedrock, is Elephantine Island, which is where this is from. And you see another one of these boxes, which is, unlike the sarcophagus style ones, this is an upright one. It's just on its side. But there's actually a bench inside where you'd sit down. And you see this pyramidal top, which is also truncated, like the Great Pyramid. But this is also very important because I think it ties into the Ark of the Covenant, which was once stored on this island, supposedly right here in this chamber underneath the temple on the island. And I think I think the Ark of the Covenant might have actually gone from here to Ethiopia. And I think it may have actually left Ethiopia more recently and come back potentially into Egypt. And because it was, because this red granite has a radioactive property of its own, it's possible that the radioactive ark could have been hidden under here without having its signature being detected as easily. So that's very interesting to me because not in this specific room, but I do think that the Ark of the Covenant may have come back to this general area. And this was interesting. When I shot a picture of this room with the flash on, look at this one. I got one here and one even better with just
nice orbs.
Tons of orbs up in this room, which was a good sign to me. But yeah, anyway, so this is essentially how far I wanted to get here. I wanted to talk about the Ark of the Covenant a little bit, or maybe mention that I'm starting to come to a hypothesis that the Ark of the Covenant itself may be a part of the Hall of Records, essentially. Like it may have information within it. And I know that it does pretty exactly seem to fit into that box in the center of the King's Chamber at the Great Pyramid. And it may have something to do with connecting to the Great Pyramid, or be a battery of sorts, perhaps. I know Manu says today in speaking about this Hall of Records, he's describing it more like a portable Hall of Records at times. So yeah, I think the arc, you know, it's tying into all these other arcs as well that we're starting to see. But yeah, this is basically the end here. I've got one more picture here, which is, this is my cat. Her name's Mishka, and this is my little lioness who was protecting my archives while I was gone. And she is the end of every trip I do.
She's so beautiful. Tell us her name again for those that didn't hear it.
Her name's Mishka, which means little bear in Russian, because she is. So anyway, I'll stop sharing now and come back here. I was gonna say I was gonna make it through this whole thing without pausing once, but I kind of have to use the bathroom quick. Do you mind if we pause real quick?
I told you to go before
I went to the bathroom a lot of times. I tried, but I really
And we're back super fast. Trevor, let's just have a quick once over. Thank you for sharing beautiful Mishka with us. She's so pretty and so beautiful, and I know you just love her so much. Let's just have an overview of what you've delivered today. If you had a specific message and everything that you've shared between these two great countries, Greece and Italy, what do you think the core message might be?
Yeah, well, I think it actually fills in a lot of the gaps between what we shared already too. In our first interview, we got into this Hall of Records in Egypt, which was a lot of what I first started researching. Then we went to the third eye, which is what I consider one of the most important aspects of this whole thing. But yeah, with this last part one and part two of this interview, I think it really got into the middle, because once I realized that there was all this knowledge encoded in all these different ways, hidden in all these different places from this very distant golden age in our remote past, you have to ask what happened to that knowledge, because humanity would obviously try their best to hold on to this. And if a global catastrophe like a flood had actually happened, it might have been easy for someone to kind of take over the remnants of what was still left, showing the antediluvian or pre-flood world. So I do believe that essentially what happened was the Ptolemaic period, starting in like the 300s AD, BC, was leading towards this time where eventually, basically, what I think is the actual pharaonic lineages, which in Egypt's own history, they tell us go back to the Shemsu Hor, which were the companions of Horus, or the offspring of the gods who ruled for a time. That before that, it was the gods themselves were ruling with Egypt. So this, I think, was when Atlantis and Egypt were working together, and some of these other races were helping us with this stuff, showing us a lot of these arts and sciences. And I think it was kind of the lineages that considered themselves tied to the pharaoh still and to be royalty, essentially packed up and left Egypt, and they kind of had already fallen into this darker type of means of holding on to their power at that point. And these dark cults like of Canaan, like the Baal and Moloch and human sacrifice type religions, were already kind of corrupting the land. And I think a lot of these kind of royal families, let's say, moved from Egypt to Europe and took the Library of Alexandria with them, essentially, and started from there on building this whole archive of true human history, which is still, in my opinion, probably mostly all under the Vatican still. So that's a hard pill for some Catholics to swallow. And I want to come into this information gently and not really shock people in this. It's you know, because I don't believe Christianity is corrupt. I think if you're following the teachings of Jesus, you're on the right path. But if you're following the Pope you're kind of on the wrong path here, because this religion has really turned itself into nothing more than a structure that basically tries to control thought on the planet and to kind of stunt our third eyes and prevent us from becoming the sovereigns we should be, prevent us from opening a third eye like Jesus told us to, and all the great prophets did, really, the inspired ones. But their messages have always faced this opposition, this corruption, and mistranslations, and intentional means of censoring this message so that humans don't really have access to the knowledge they really want that can lead to spiritual development rather than religious, following orders, basically. So we didn't have a choice for so many centuries. Like the church, just persecuted and killed anyone who didn't want to listen to what they said. So they tried to just censor this out of the whole, generation after generation. Eventually, we lost so much of it. And there were these Gnostic traditions all throughout, which is what I get deep into in the heart of my book. And what I researched was looking at all these centuries where the Gnostic lineages kept popping up and hiding, and all these clever ways to kind of avoid the church. And it gets very interesting towards the Renaissance, especially when the Hermetica is brought in to Italy, and Cosimo de' Medici, he brought that Hermetic text in, which ended up kind of challenging the Vatican quite a bit, but at the same time is kind of showing how much they had plagiarized from it and things like that.
Brilliant. It's interesting the way that you pronounce Medici, because I've had so many Americans and they say Medici, but in Europe, like we say Medici. And I've been there to the palace in Firenze, in Florence, to the Medici Galleria upstairs, and oh my gosh, it's just mind-blowing near the Ponte Vecchio, and just so stunning. And the Duomo, oh my God, the Duomo Cathedral, the acoustics, the Neapolitan, the design, it's just so exciting. Our planet is so exciting. Our planet is so beautiful. It's just so mysterious in so many ways. And we are in the greatest time of disclosing every element, not just our star brothers and sisters, although that's pretty huge in and of itself, but that we've always had a union with on and off planet brothers and sisters. And there's always been this magnificent technology and beauty and art and design and technology that is so great, but none as great as the individual human being. And again, the nod to the pineal gland, the plug in to plug out, plug in. As we've been speaking, I just literally got a text from my brother, Jean-Charles Moyen, who lets me know that BoobTube took down his video. YouTube removed the video of my cell phone. Amazing proof. Thanks again, YouTube. So yesterday, did you see Elena and Jean-Charles were sharing how Jean-Charles teleports himself and has done since he was a child, and he's brought the biggest body of truth on that subject than anyone I've seen on this planet. Jean-Charles Moyen, the film director who made movies on his life. And yesterday he was able to prove that he teleported from Canada to Japan, Sendai, where he's got a lot of connection there. And on his phone, he was able to prove with his wife, Melanie Charret, that his phone was showing that his GPS was in Japan. And BoobTube took it down. I mean, if they think they're going to stop the volcano, the eruption of disclosure, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. Too late, mate. Too bad. So sad. It's all out. I wrote down the word orbs here when you were showing us that beautiful the imagery there. And orbs is so interesting because I don't know if that was on your phone you got them or on your camera. They seem to appear better filter wise on a camera. Was that a camera that you got the orbs on?
I think that was on my cell phone. Yeah, you couldn't see them with the flash off, but with the flash on you got them. Got a bunch.
Yeah, it's interesting again how we can connect to the ethereal spirit, the beautiful elements or entities of love that are always in these places, wafting around, drifting around. And I was in the cellar of I think St. Paul's Cathedral with my mum and my sister years ago. And I said, right, mum, I'm going to take a picture. There's going to be nothing here, no orbs, nothing. And she went, go on then. And so I said to, you know, just heart to heart, like, all disappear because she's going to shit herself. It's going to be funny. I took a picture. There wasn't a single orb. Then I said, right, mum, I'm going to take another picture. And there were thousands and thousands. My mum shit herself. I just walked out of there really quick. She's like, how did you do that? I said, I just asked them to come back, like literally asked them to come back. So funny. Trevor, it's always a joy to play with you. I know that there are many different areas that we went: Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Pythagoras, Socrates, Damon, as people were coming out, especially scholars, you know, connecting their hearts as science minds to their hearts. And someone like him was saying he had a guide he would talk to, like an angelic element. It was turned into DEMON, you know, along with many other words that have been taken from our beautiful vocabulary and made into something dark and demonic, which again, we also refuse, and send back to where it came from, which was the toilet of ancientness. Trevor, let me come to you for final words, please. And just also note that you are available for conferences, for presentations. You have several presentations ready to go. You're a great archaeology researcher. So final words, my friend.
All right, thanks. Yeah. Well, yeah, actually what you just said about this is something we mentioned before, is that a lot of times when they're trying to gain control over the human race and the human mind, it's to do with using symbols that we already have that are powerful, that are positive, and taking them and twisting them. And so that is very much at the heart of all of this, of what I'm saying with the Bible, with the Catholic teachings. Obviously the Bible is the one symbol that they would want to twist and turn as much as they could, as well as Jesus himself and Jesus' own teachings. So yeah, it's a little tricky to see that in the church, or it's hard, it's difficult for some people to acknowledge that. But you know, Jesus himself did say in the Bible, even, you know, many will come in my name and they will deceive many, saying that they are me or that they have my authority. I think he's directly talking about popes here. But yeah, so I think between all these lions and cats and crossed keys and tall hats and you know, all these different symbols. This is why I tend to make long presentations, because if I show just one or two of these, it may not get the point across as much as to show I see all of these symbols relating this concept of trying to flex religious or spiritual muscle over the planet and its collective consciousness. And these things are all hidden in plain sight, as we say. So once you pull apart the symbolism and start looking at the occult language, you realize what they have been saying this whole time about what they're doing. And you know, to me, seeing these cats or sphinxes, it's a clear sign that essentially directly below there underground is probably a hidden archive or record. To me, that's what that symbol is coming to mean very specifically these days. So yeah, I do see us coming into the beautiful, beautiful age of disclosure here. I think it's going to have a lot to do with what's in the Vatican archives, just as much as what's going to come up from underneath Giza. So these are the same. And we know there's so much more than that between the ARCs or Legends of Hall of Records or Edgar Casey's information. We know in Romania, there's these halls of records, and in Mexico and Guatemala, this one site I'm looking at, Cuba, the Grand Canyon, you know, Ukraine. Salah's been talking about, I know there's a black pyramid in Ukraine a lot of people have gotten close to, and have even reported meeting strange, mysterious beings that have forced them to leave and not going closer. Anyway, I'm seeing all of these Hall of Records things tying together here. And I think the one that has more than anything is probably the one under the Vatican, because they've been taking from all these other ones wherever they can get it. So yeah, it's kind of gets into more difficult stuff to talk about, because there's going to be a lot of religious, I don't know, pressure. It's going to be hard for some people who are very dedicated to these religions to differentiate, but, you know, recognize if you're following Jesus' teachings, that's good. If you're following the popes, just switch back to Jesus, or, you know,
Yeah,
what the
it's gonna
actual
be
message is, which is God is within, this connection to the divine is within. It's about doing good, being kind, being loving. It's very simple, really. And it's, so yeah, anyway, I'm really so excited to get another chance to round all this information out. Now I feel like we got a whole trilogy, 4 really, but this third with 2 parts really helps fill in the in-between, because yeah, that's the big question. Once you realize humanity used to have all this knowledge, and we did build these pyramids with this knowledge, we as humanity that have always been here, I think we're the same souls reincarnate that were back here then. And I think back then it was just that we were more in touch with the star nations, and they were helping us to actually build this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's about it. Yeah. So glad to come back on here. And I want to thank you again so much for helping me break this whole story out, because now I finally feel like I can get into doing my own series, but you've really, really helped me to get this started. So I want to thank you so much, Dani.
It's my pleasure, Trevor. I know genius when I see it, and you've worked so hard. Go ahead.
Also, I just want to say I did get my ticket to the Galactic and Spiritual Informers Connection for this year, and I'm so looking forward to being there. So anyone who's thinking about coming, come. I would love to meet you. I know you'd love to meet everyone.
That's lovely. Yeah, Trevor, you were such a great attendee last year, which is obviously how we met. And again, I'll never forget, because we had armed guards and security around us for different reasons, and obviously for the enjoyment and comfortability of all our attendees too. And there was just this mad moment where there was a lull in the crowd, because there was 1,000 people there, and you passed me in the corridor and you looked at me and you just did this beautiful, the energy from you just sent me this love. And then I said to the guard, I need to speak to that man. Plus you looked like Indiana Jones walking down the corridor. And that was it. And that was it. And that was the beginning of our friendship. And I'm so grateful to you and happy to support you, because, like, one of the reasons for my channel is to help support and to bring as much information on disclosure and the beauty of our planet and how brilliant we are as individual humans, and that we're all in some kind of healing. Let's fill in the memories that we've lost from our past, that we came back here without. Let's put them all back together and lovingly come together and draw love, support, and unity as we awaken as a mass, a humanity. All right, Trevor Grassi, my darling, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Dani. Talk to you soon.
Beautiful. And to you guys out there, thank you for being with us again. Another beautiful just embroidery of pictures and symbols, symbology, iconography, ancient texts, all the different ways that Trevor Grassi puts his great work together for us and breaks it down into simple understandings. And I know it's going to be very, very thought-provoking for you. You are welcome to go directly to him for questions, have him on your channels for you to enjoy his presentations too, and let's help share and spread the work of the ancient past, the present past, the present also, as this great knowledge of our planet unfolds. My name is Dani Henderson. I send you my love, and I will see you soon.